Well, ladies and gentlemen, I say, hasn't the weather been interesting for the time of year? Yes, it has. And here we are, your favorite radio cast pod show thing. With me, James Whale. Yeah, I don't know what's wrong with me this week. I have to be honest, Rob. I'm feeling slightly strange, but there we are. Now, this week I'm actually not here.
Aren't you?
No, I'm not here. I'm away this week. So what we're going to do is feature two interviews from past programs, and maybe you won't have heard these. And if you want to hear them more, of course, you can go back to the programs. But two guests on the show this week, Chesney Hawkes. Some people say that he'll turn up to the opening of a fridge.
Will he?
Yeah, but I think that's unfair. So I'll be talking to Chesney Hawkes and presumably some music from him on the programme as well.
I bet they're expensive fridges. They wouldn't turn up to
Well, they
my
might
fridge.
well be. And another guest we had that got quite a lot of stick. So I thought that's exactly the sort of guest to bring back and try again. And a man, listen, I have to say, and you'll hear with the interview, a man lots of people detest, but he has raised an enormous amount of money for charity. And he can't be all bad because people buy his books in the millions. But he's a man who's had quite a lot of bad publicity one way or the other. But I've always found him to be charming and a very entertaining talker. So I'll be introducing you again to Jeffrey Archer. So Chesney Hawkes and Jeffrey Archer, guests on this week's programme. How diverse is that?
Very.
But that's because I'm not actually here.
I'm sure you are.
Well, yes, I am. I'm somewhere, but not actually physically here at the moment, which is fine. James Whale radio show that broadcasts, of course, all over the world, and we'd like to say hello to our listeners in far-flung areas, and that may well be you. People listening on radio programs, on radio stations, which are good enough to take this program up and down the length and breadth of this country. And by the way, we've also got music from Men with Ven. Do you remember we tried to get an interview with Men with Ven, didn't we?
We did. Did we do the interview or did we not do the interview?
I don't think we ever did the interview, but they sent us some more music. And it's quite entertaining. This is a bit of a Mickey take from the actor Jason Statham, who I quite like. I like his movies, don't you?
I love his movies. He's great.
Yeah, very good indeed. But for all that, I asked a question on Facebook because everybody's been talking about the EU referendum. And the one thing people are talking about is whether or not the voting age should be lowered to 16. I think it should. I don't see why on earth we should be making huge decisions for years to come without including the people who are going to be living more through it. And I think a lot of young people, age of 16 upwards now, are far better informed than when I was 16. So I think they should. But I'm interested to know what you think. And we asked that question. Peter Chambers says, not a chance. You can't entrust teens to select a government. To be honest, it should be 25 plus at least. You have lived and hopefully contributed a little first. Peter, I think that's a bit unfair. We're talking about the EU referendum. And I think a lot of young people will probably be talking about politics far more in school than adults. Phil Laycock says, definitely not. I actually think it should be increased to 21. Quite a lot of you think that. Mark Gibbs says, people who can't hold a conversation in English shouldn't be able to vote. God, Mark, that would let loads of British people out, wouldn't it? Kevin Ackerman says 16-year-olds can vote only if they tidy their rooms first. And Matthew Shaw says, nobody without their own home and family even knows or cares who they be voting for. Lots of very, very entrenched thoughts out there. I think a lot of those are wrong. I think if you encourage people to have to think about the issues that they become much more involved citizens of the country, and it affects everybody. Whether we stay in or whether we leave the European Union affects all of us, some for the good, some for the worse, some for the good, some for the better. Well, whichever way you want to look at it. And I think we need to be aware of that. That is my thought for the day. Shall we go to the first interview?
Yes, Chesney Hawkes, I think.
You too. I was going to ask that question. Should we do it light or should we do it not so light? But if you want light, let's have Chesney Hawkes. Remember what Chesney Hawkes' big hit was?
The one and only.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to the one and only Chesney Hawkes.
Sitting in my room and I'm on my own. It's cold outside and I'm feeling alone. So I turn that dial and my radio's on. I hear James Well and my troubles are gone. I hear James Well on the radio. I hear James Well and his podcast show. I hear James Well on the radio. James Well and his podcast show. James Well on the radio.
We are the one and only. That's not how it goes, is it? How does it go?
Well, it defeats the object of the I am the one and only. If you say we are the one and only.
Oh, yeah. Chesney Hawkes, how are you, Ches?
I'm fine, James. Great to hear your voice, mate.
It's been a long time. What are you up to?
Well, right now I am on tour with Ant and Dec. It's been I've been involved in their arena tour around the country. It's been a right old laugh, actually.
Do you get to sing in it, or do they just take the pee out of you all the time?
A little bit of both, to be honest. Well, there's no pee taking, I have to say. They're lovely boys, and what I do in it is I don't know if you've ever seen the show. It's the Saturday Night Takeaway show, but they have a segment on it called Sing Along Live, where they get people from the great British public to kind of almost karaoke iconic songs or whatever. And so on the live show, they get 3 contestants from the crowd to come up and sing with me. So it's been a real, every night is a new journey, shall we say.
Listen, I know you've got a new album out. We're going to talk about that in a moment. But how do you listen? Because I'm getting on, but you never seem to get older. Are you taking some sort of tablet?
To be honest, James, I think it's got a lot to do with the genes. Because my old man, even though he's been through, the sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and then cancer and crazy life, he still looks like a schoolboy. So, and my mum's still, Goldie Hawn lookalike, and I think that I was lucky in that respect.
Every time, and we haven't spoken for about 5 years or so, but every time I meet you, you're happy and you're cheerful. Now, I'm not sure if this is the real you or not.
Right. Is that a question or a statement?
No, I think it was a question mark at the end.
Right, okay. No, I mean, I think I am generally a happy person. I have a positive outlook on life, and I don't have a lot to be dour about. I've got a beautiful wife, 3 gorgeous kids. I'm still making a living out of making music, which is a miracle. So, nothing kind of horrible has happened where I can warrant being a grumpy old git.
Yeah, you nearly said like me.
I left that one out, James. I would never say that about you.
Because this is the thing. Listen, you've got a great pop voice. You've had one of the most infectious hit records of all time. Everybody sings it at karaoke. Everybody knows it. But after that, it never really happened. And I just wonder whether or not that really deep down left you feeling fairly fed up with the whole business.
Yeah, they definitely did, James. I had a time where, obviously it was depressing because, I was only young, I was 19 when I put that record out, and then when it kind of didn't carry on in that way, I definitely did get a little depressed. And, there are times in my life where, I remember this one time where I had just bought a house, and the same week I was dropped by my record label. My girlfriend dumped me, and I was sitting on a mattress in the middle of the floor in this house, thinking, man, I can't even get my old management on the phone anymore. They won't return my calls. And so, I've definitely had moments where, yeah, it's a little bit depressing, but you can't let that kind of. Life is a journey, isn't it? And you have to take those ups and downs. And I'm glad to have experienced those ups and downs in life, because I wouldn't be the person I am now if I hadn't experienced it.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I absolutely agree with you. It reminds me, I know Luke and Matt Goss quite well, and they had similar sorts of problems. Now they've both gone their different ways, and they're doing remarkably well.
Yeah, doing great.
I also remember the days back in the 70s, long before you were born, obviously. I was working in Newcastle at the time on a radio station in Newcastle called Metro, and I was very friendly with a guy called Brian Johnson from a group called Geordie, and they were like the Northeast's version of Slade, and it kind of all went wrong. Bear with me, and I'll show you where I'm going. It all went wrong, and I remember one night I was doing my radio show. Brian came into the studio just to have a chat, not to be on the air. He had a little business putting sunroofs in cars. And he said, I've just been invited to London to do an audition for a band called AC/DC, man. Do you think I should do it?
Well, it's crazy life, isn't it? That is an amazing story. I love that.
And I bumped into him about a year ago, and of course he's probably one of the wealthiest men in the music business now. Yeah.
I mean, you never know what's around the corner, do you? I mean, there's always that kind of fairy tale dream come true job that just comes along, and you just never know.
And you see, you've got a great new album out, and so you haven't actually got fed up with it. You've decided to carry on. And how have you changed? What have you changed now, do you think, since the original Chesney Hawks?
Well, I think as I said earlier, I was very young when I first kind of released a record. I was actually only 18, 19 years old, and I never ever stopped writing music and recording and playing live, and so me as an artist has kind of carried on all through the years. And of course you're going to change in all sorts of ways. I mean, I'm certainly not going to be writing about the same things I was writing about back then. I'm a married man with 3 kids, and it's a whole different thing. And I think musically I've probably matured and kind of experimented in all sorts of different ways. Like, I don't know if you noticed, James, but when I grew up for 5 years as a kid in Nashville, Tennessee, so I have like a real kind of a country heart in some ways. So I've kind of gone down that route a little bit with this album, and I possibly in the future I might actually think about making a country album. So I like to go in all sorts of directions, really.
I think you can probably hear my dog who's yelling in the background. I
can.
We do this. We do this show wherever I lay my hat. I'd like to hear you sing with your dad.
Well, there is actually a recording that Dad and I did of Father and Son, funnily enough. I think we're the only actual father and son to have released that song. It is out there on iTunes. So your wish is my command.
All right. Look, lastly, you're doing the tour with Anton Deck. Anton Deck will presumably have a new program coming up on television. Any chance of you getting back onto TV in a more mainstream way or not?
I wouldn't say no to that particular show if the opportunity arose, but it's not something that I'm desperate to do or anything. But of course, as you said before, you never know what's around the corner, do you?
Would you go into the Big Brother house?
It's not something I would desperately want to do. Have you done that, James? Did you do that?
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't do it. No.
No. It doesn't appeal to me, I have to say. Sitting there cooped up in a prison with a bunch of crazy people that you probably would never spend time with. I mean, I'm sure that they must have psychiatrists on hand just in case you crack up.
I can't sleep with other people. Well, I let me rephrase that. No, let me not bother.
Yeah, what, just kind of people you don't know in the house. You're not happy with them being around you. You can't sleep.
I don't think I've got what you'd call a dormitory mentality.
No, I don't think I have either. I like my creature comforts, and I'm not very good with sleeping anyway. I'm a really light sleeper. So I can imagine in a house full of crazy people, that would be a difficult scenario.
Okay, Real Life Love, the title of the album, and what is the motivation of this?
Well, these days, because my kind of day job is writing and producing for different projects, different artists, film and TV, or whatever kind of comes my way. So my albums have become songs that I write for whatever project that I just can't let go for whatever reason, and I end up putting them on the Chesney pile, and then I've got a collection of songs that I can go and make an album. This album, I mean, there are some songs that I wrote literally 23 years ago. There's a song that I wrote with Nick Kershaw called John Lennon Lived Here, about my first trip to New York. And then there's a song that I wrote literally last year. So it really does kind of span. It was all recorded coherently together with a band, but it really is a kind of a mixture of different songs from different times of my life.
What is the song that you are most proud of? I mean, because a lot of people, you've written and produced quite a lot of fairly famous, very famous people, and there have been some big hits of songs that you've written or co-written, which people might not realise you had anything to do. Which is the one you're most proud of?
I think that a lot of artists will always kind of go to what the recent writings, and there's a song I wrote for my son. On this album, actually, it's called Aeroplane, and it came from something that he said to me. It must have been about 6 years ago, when as a father, you probably understand. He used to like me to make him paper airplanes. So he said, "Daddy, please make me an airplane. I want another one just the same." And I just wrote that in my book. And, time has gone on, and he's now 13 and doesn't ask me for paper aeroplanes anymore. And it's got me thinking about that kind of, those little moments of snapshot in time that, you want to kind of hold on to. And, because you blink and you miss it, and they've, got girlfriends, and they don't want to hold hands with their old man anymore, So that song I'm quite proud of. It's probably because it's quite such an emotional, subject and close to my heart, but...
Chesney,
yeah,
make me an aeroplane.
I would do that for you, mate. Thank you for doing that, saying that.
Take it easy, my friend.
All right, James, take care.
Daddy, please make me an aeroplane. I want another one just the same. I watch it fly with the sun in my eyes. I walk you home in the rain from the fair. Are you cold? I'll give you my coat to wear. I'll treasure this moment I almost missed. These moments make up a life, and you wanna take it all in, just fall in. So many snapshots in time. If anyone can make me stand still, you will. You will. Remember when you pushed me into the sea, laughing so hard we could barely breathe, like long lost friends. You know you will see again. These moments make up a life, and you wanna take it all in, just fall in. So many snapshots in time. If anyone can make me stand still, you will. You will. There's no time to kill. How do we stop the wheels turning for a moment? Let's get off the train, let the aeroplane go. Let it go.
Just like magic, the world disappears.
Let it go.
Now everything's clear.
Let it go.
Just like magic.
These moments make up a life, and you wanna take it all in, just fall in. So many snapshots in time. If anyone can make me stand still, you will. You will. Daddy, please make me an aeroplane.
Chesney, thank you very much indeed. Great song, by the way, of Chesney's. He's still trying. He is still trying to get there. Is he too old to have another hit record? Well, who knows? You're never too old, are you, really? Chesney Hawkes, thank you very much indeed. Now, talking about music, shall we have a bit of contemporary music?
Is this the men? I've been looking forward to this. Is this the Men with
Yeah,
Them?
this is the Men with Ven. Men with Ven, and a record that they call Jason Statham, which is it a tribute to that well-known action hero?
Don't know. Should we take a listen and find out?
Let's have a listen.
He's Michael Caine, Daniel Craig, Ray Winston rolled into one. He'd have Jude Law for breakfast, then Orlando Bloom for his lunch. He's hard as nails and makes the women go all weak at the knees. On land and sea they all agree that he's a right tasty geezer. From market stall to martial arts, he really is different class. Lock, stock, revolver, the Expendables and Killer Elite.
Cars and cash, guns and birds. Cars and cash, guns and birds.
Snatch and crank, the mechanic, transporter 1, 2 and 3.
Cars and cash, guns and birds. Cars and cash.
From market stall to martial arts, he really is different class. I'd watch yourself if you're a grass. Turkish Christmas bacon, green and Anson raw remember some of his names. Martin Crawford, Leather, Chelios and Jensen Ames. But it don't really matter what he's called, cause he always acts the same. And I must admit his American accent is a tiny bit lame.
Men with Ven and Jason Statham. Don't forget, if you'd like to be on the show at any time, a guest maybe performing on the show or just having a chat, please get in touch with us here at the James Well Radio Show. jameswellradio@gmail.com is my email, jameswellradio@gmail.com. And please check out our website, jameswellradio.co.uk. The shop is available there. You can find out my thoughts on Ford motor cars, which I've been driving for a while. You can have a look at some of the products we sell. And if you would like a free audiobook, maybe to take away with you this summer, then check out what's happening at Audible as well. And as I say, if you want to get in touch, all you've got to do is email us at jameswellradio@gmail.com. Now, let's talk to a man who has probably had more success than anyone I know in a number of careers. Politician, author, bon vivant. Lord Jeffrey Archer joins the programme now. Jeffrey, thank you for coming on the programme. How are you?
I'm very well indeed. I thought you were going to say auctioneer, as I did an auction for you.
I was going to get to that, actually. I will get to that in a minute. That was going to be my end bit now, Jeffrey. I always thought you would make a very good broadcaster. You haven't done that. Why not?
No, I'm fascinated by broadcasting and fascinated by the medium. It's a wonderful medium. But I'm afraid I've done so many other things and enjoyed so many other things and had such a privileged life that, well, you well know, James, you can't do everything. I actually always wanted to be the captain of the England cricket team, and they just keep missing me. And my dearest friends are now telling me it's too late, which is, there you are. It's the way you're treated by some people.
Now, which book, just remind me, because of the prolific nature of writing, you are at the moment, and we're very lucky to get you because you are away writing your latest book. Which one is this?
Well, I'm doing a series called The Clifton Chronicles, the story of Harry Clifton, a boy born in the back streets of Bristol to a docker, is his father, and he falls in love with Emma Barrington, and Sir James Barrington owns the docks. So and I've decided to do a 7-part series, and the book that's currently number 1 on the Sunday Times is the 4th book, and I'm out here in Mallorca at the moment in the middle of writing the 5th book.
Oh, what a life, Jeffrey! What a life. Mallorca, of course, that's the island that Don Quixote was based on, isn't it?
Indeed, it is, and it's a lovely island and beautiful weather. It's got everything for a writer because you can relax and get on with the job and not have terrible people like James Whale, that man from the BBC, ringing you, and you can get on with your work. It's just wonderful.
Is the current book based on fact, somebody that you knew in Bristol, or is it a complete fiction?
It is fiction in the sense that that's what it's on the shelves as, but Harry Clifton is very much based on my life as a young man. Of course, I am a West Countryman. I come from Weston-super-Mare, and I am a West Countryman, and I know that part of the world. So when I decided where to put my hero and heroine in this particular series of books, I chose the West Country because I spent the first 18 years of my life there.
When you were a young man, what did you want to do?
Well, my mother had been a politician and a woman of tremendous energy, also a writer, actually. So first and foremost, I wanted to be a politician, and indeed entered the House at the age of 29, had 5 years in the House, and almost went bankrupt after a very foolish investment, and wrote my first book, Not a Penny More, Not a Penny Less. So I went from being a politician to almost by mistake becoming a writer.
Do you actually think that if life had turned differently for you, you would be possibly or have been Prime Minister. Was that an ambition that you ever had in later life?
Well, I entered the House at 29, so clearly I was ambitious, and it would be foolish to deny otherwise. But if you are saying, I suspect, after all those years, I'd have ended up as Minister of State for Transport. And if you're asking would I swap that for having sold 270 million books, no, James, I wouldn't.
270 million? That's amazing. Did you ever think that you'd be an author of such repute?
Well, no, to begin with, because the first book, Not a Penny More, Not a Penny Less, sold 3,000 copies. And I now keep reading in the press that it was an instant success. It was not. It was Cain and Abel that took off and sold 1 million in the first week. That was where the big change came and life changed. Now, it is true they went back. The readers went back and bought Not a Penny More, Not a Penny Less. And it also sold millions. But that was 5 years down the line before that happened. I was literally, at the time, living off my wife. I didn't have a job. And she kept saying, are you going to get a real job? And I kept saying, I think the writing will happen.
Did there come a time when you knew you'd written a book and you knew that it was going to be a huge success?
Well, you don't, you sit there being told and you get very, very nervous. I did know that Cain and Abel had been auctioned in the United States and Simon & Schuster had paid $3,200,000 for it. So I had a feeling that they believed it was going to be a success. But the selling of 1 million copies in Britain in the first week, no, you can't be prepared for that. You just sit there not believing it. And even years later you don't believe it. It's amazing.
Do you think somebody who's not well known could have that success as a writer?
I always answer that question in the same way, James. In my young life, I watched 2 books come out in the same week. One by Bob Hope, who was one of the best-known people on earth, and one by David Niven, who was very well-known, but certainly not in the United States well-known. And Bob Hope's book sold 7 million worldwide, and The Moon's a Balloon by David Niven sold 27 million. So the answer is it's quite useful to be well-known, but in the end, it's the book that matters, and Mr. Niven proved it beyond all of us.
Now you're sitting working on the latest in the series of books you're doing at the moment. Do you ever get a sort of a block? We hear about writer's block, but do you sit there and think, oh my golly, I've promised this book, I've got to have it done in a couple of days, yet I just can't think where the story's going?
That hasn't been a problem yet after 37 years. In fact, I've named my home in Mallorca Writer's Block. But to date, that hasn't happened. And indeed, like you, I keep hearing about it and other people tell me about it. I think I'm a natural storyteller, and therefore it's a lucky gift. But you're quite right. Tomorrow morning I might wake up and say, hell, where am I going?
Do you ever get that thing when the storyline comes into your mind, you're out having dinner in the evening or you're sitting there having a glass of wine, and then suddenly a chapter comes into your mind that you rather wasn't there?
No, you're more likely to think of a chapter that will be better. I had the ending of the next book all planned out in my mind. I thought I'd got a wonderful ending. And then when I actually got to it and started writing, the pen took me in a totally different direction with a totally different ending. So that can happen. The other thing that happens, you say when you're out to dinner, can that sort of thing happen, James? Sometimes a word. Yesterday I was wrestling over a word, the word heritage and the word parentage. And I couldn't make up my mind. I actually went to bed worrying about which word worked better. The sentence was, clearly she was telling the truth about her parentage or heritage. And so sometimes even be down to one word that you're worrying about.
Which word did you go for?
Actually, heritage is in the book, and I'm going to I think, make it, that was already in. I think I'm going to make it parentage.
It's still worrying you.
You get that all the time, actually. You think, I can make that sharper, I can make that better, I can make the reader turn the page quicker. So yes, you're doing that all the time, which is actually why I escape away to Mallorca. because there it's so peaceful. One can think, right.
The interesting thing, of course, is people said books would become a thing of the past. People wouldn't read in the future, but it's actually more so now, isn't it? With sort of electronic books, Kindles, tablets, more and more people are reading that perhaps didn't read before.
I think that is true, and the shock for me was 5 years ago. My advisors at Macmillan said 5% of people are now reading you on ebook, and they said to me, in 5 years' time, Geoffrey, it'll be 50%. And I must say, I huffed and puffed and didn't believe that. And sitting here today, that is exactly right. 50% of my books are being read on one form or another of ebook, and 50% people are actually buying a real book.
Have you done an audiobook yet?
All of them, every single book I've done has been an audiobook, and I've had the great privilege of having some wonderful people reading the books, because it's very important not just to have an audio book, but to be confident with the person who's reading it. So, yes, all the Clifton Chronicles are in audio, and all the other books, Cain and Abel's in audio, Mother Pennymore's in audio.
Have you never done one yourself?
I've been asked by my publishers to do one. The problem is time. You very kindly said at the moment, wouldn't you enjoy being a broadcaster? The truth is, everything's time. And if you're going to read a 120,000-word book, that's going to take a month out of your life. And so, in any case, I rather like having a famous actor or actress on there doing it for you.
Well, just remember, when they haven't got the time, Geoffrey, I'm always available.
You're available, James.
Oh, to do any of your books, Geoffrey, absolutely. Tell me about politics today. Do you think politics today has changed out of all recognition from when you were more closely involved?
Well, I have a great deal of sympathy for people in politics. Now I'm sitting on the outside watching. When people decide to give service and do a job for which they will be paid far less than they could if they'd not done politics. And that applies to all three of our leaders at the moment. That applies to David Cameron, Nick Clegg, and then Ed Miliband. They could have all made a lot more money doing something else. The one that gets me really cross is the automatic criticism of someone who's been to Eton and Oxford and wants to be Prime Minister. If we've reached a stage in our country, James, where we can't relax enough in our skins to take someone who's had a good education, that's a terrible situation. And I have to remind people, and I'd say it if it was Ed Miliband, I have to remind people that Mr. Cameron got a first-class honours degree. So he's a fairly bright individual, and he should not be condemned for that. If they feel he's doing a bad job, that's one thing, but they should not be criticizing the education he had.
Do you think somebody could rise, if you like, and it might even be a plot for a book, of course, do you think somebody could rise from a very ordinary background, come from a very ordinary family? And I know Margaret Thatcher came from a family of a grocers and everything else. But do you still think there is the possibility that somebody who perhaps didn't have a university education could get into politics, get into government in this country still?
There are always weird exceptions, and they're often great men and great women who the rules don't apply to. And we've seen it in the last 30 or 40 years, because we've seen John Major become Prime Minister of our country, and he'd be the first to tell you that he did not have a formal education. His education, of course, started, one might say, after he left school, when that remarkable brain of his became attuned to the world of politics. And indeed, he did become Prime Minister. Winston Churchill never went to university and is rated as one of the great Prime Ministers we've ever produced. So yes, if you're saying can it be done today, even more so I would say it was possible today that a truly bright 17 or 18-year-old who suddenly decided they wanted to go into politics, yes, if there's no reason they shouldn't be educated between the age of 18 and later. Indeed, in my own case, James, I actually have written in Who's Who, educated by my wife since leaving Wellington School, Somerset, and Brasenose College, Oxford.
You mentioned the word service, Geoffrey, and I think that's a very important word in politics. And I think sometimes people go into politics and they call it their career, which is fine, but they don't actually seem to realize that politics is it's a service. It's a service industry to look after the people of the country.
Yes, and if you don't feel that way, you shouldn't be in it. I mean, for me, the fun was the people. There are some people in politics. The fun is the red boxes. That's fine. God knows we've got to have people who are capable of doing that. But for me, the most fun was on the ground, listening to what people had to say and going and fighting and not very often winning. It's a great battle trying to pull off even a minor achievement. But that for me was always the fun, which is perhaps why I loved election campaigns. They were always, for me, the 3 weeks I enjoyed most in politics. And working both for Margaret Thatcher and John Major over 5 election campaigns was perhaps the most fun I ever had.
I like Prime Minister's question times because I think it tells you a lot about people. But lots of politicians always say, oh, we would like to get rid of this. This doesn't actually show us at our best. What do you think about PMQs?
Well, it's changed a lot since I left the House. And, of course, no one listens to us in the House of Lords in that way. The Prime Minister's questions is quite rightly the centre of question time. When I was in the lower house as a child, I entered the House at 29, there was no radio or television. And I think the standard of debate was higher for one simple reason. No one was interested in a soundbite. No one was interested in delivering one sentence that they hoped would capture a headline the next day. Speeches were much better considered. I've never forgotten Selwyn Lloyd standing up and answering a question in the following way. Now, what I'm about to say, not only did I witness, James, but if it was done today, the press would say, terrible. Mr. Selwyn Lloyd stood at the dispatch box and said, I haven't considered that. I will, and I will come back to the honourable gentleman. Which was common sense. In other words, he didn't know the answer, but he was willing to look into it. Nowadays, you're meant to know everything about everything and have an instant reply. Nobody's that bright. And so sometimes you get, I'm afraid, some rather silly replies. So I know I'm getting old and boring and dull, but I liked the days when there was no radio and television in the House of Commons.
You're not getting old or boring, Geoffrey. Don't let anybody tell you that. Tell me this, if you're a young politician, who do you show most allegiance to? Your constituents who voted you in or the leader of your party?
Well, it's neither, really. When you say the leader of your party, of course he or she, very, very important. It's whether it's the people on the ground or the party. Now, there's 2 very honest and fair answers to that, James. You first and foremost represent your constituency and should be telling those people in the House what they are thinking. But there will be bills you agree with, and there will be bills you don't agree with. And if we didn't have a whipping system, you'd never get anything through the House of Commons. Now, I believe you should vote against something if you definitely feel there's a moral issue involved and you can't vote that way. That's fine. I accept that totally. But you can't be doing that every week. Otherwise, you're not in the party, you're outside the party. So your allegiance to the party should not be underestimated. And people on the street, people outside sometimes feel, oh, well, they all gang together. It's not true. You've got to govern. You've got to make the country move forward. So sometimes you have to say, well, I feel that way, but the vast majority of my colleagues do not. And therefore, I will either abstain or go along with them. And they'll admire you more for that, so that when you really stand for something firmly. I remember as a child, I was 29, I stood very firmly on museum charges. I disapproved of children being charged to go into an art gallery. And I let my Conservative friend no, in no uncertain terms. But that was the only issue during that Parliament that I voted against my party. Because many of the other issues I would have felt strongly on or not been quite sure, but realized if you're going to govern, you've actually got to get bills through the House.
Let's talk finally about your charitable works, of which you do many. I've spent a fascinating evening with you for my own charity and for others, where you have raised hundreds of thousands of pounds sometimes. Actually, how much money have you raised for charity?
In my lifetime, 41 million as an auctioneer. In the last sort of 10 years, I think it's 21 million.
That's a heck of a lot.
Don't let's kid ourselves, James. Some people, I mean, I actually enjoy being an auctioneer and get a lot of fun in raising the money for different charities. So, yes, it is. It's quite demanding and it's quite tough, but I do enjoy it. It's my hobby.
Well, I have to say that you are one of the funniest entertainers I've ever seen. Don't take this the wrong way. And for anybody who ever gets invited to a charitable event where Geoffrey is doing the charity auction at the end, it is more, as far as I'm concerned, it's more like an evening of stand-up comedy than anything else.
Well, you've got to prize the money out of their wallets. You've somehow got to get the money out, and that isn't always easy. Your charity was fun because they'd all come because they were friends of yours. I was full of people who I knew, and they were friends of yours, and one could have a real go at you and a real go at the people in the audience. Sometimes I get very flat evenings, James, when they just sit and look at me and they don't pay up anything.
I have seen you demoralize people who thought they were quite clever and people who've interrupted who you've automatically fined 50 or £100 on the spot.
Certainly.
And they've had to pay up.
Certainly. The charity gets the money quite right.
Geoffrey, I'm over the time that I was allotted to talk to you because your assistant said, now Geoffrey has to get back to work. Don't keep him too long.
The day job.
Yes, back to the day job. So thank you very much indeed. And when you get back over this side, perhaps we can share a drink.
That would be lovely, James. Thank you very much and good luck with the programme.
Lord Archer, thank you.
James Well Radio Show.
There we are. That's Geoffrey Archer. And listen, if there's somebody you would prefer me to be talking to, you know the address, jameswellradio@gmail.com. Get in touch, suggest, and maybe I can get someone you would enjoy me talking to. If you've got any ideas of guests you'd like to hear on the show, then Robbo, who sits around twiddling his thumbs most of the day, he can be out there lining up guests for the next programme.
Okay, yes, I'll do that. Instead of twiddling my thumbs, I'll do that.
Yep, jameswellradio@gmail.com. Now, to finish off, we always finish off this way. Questions to the whale.
Okay, only a few questions this week because I know that you're desperate.
I'm not here.
Well, yeah.
I've got a boat to catch.
All right, okay. Are you ready?
I've got a deck chair waiting with my name on it.
I've only got one question. And it's not
I thought you said one question.
Yes, well, because you're away. So I haven't even done a tech talk or anything. You said, I'm not doing a show this week. So...
well, let's do tech talk.
Well, I haven't got anything to talk about. Ask me a technical question then.
Yeah. How can you make sure that Periscope doesn't actually cost you a fortune?
Don't use it when you got 3G written on your screen.
Oh, I better check that now. Are you sure about that?
Yeah, if it says 3G on the top of your phone, then it's costing you money or coming out your plan.
Hold on. UK. No, I think I'm okay because it's just got the little Wi-Fi symbol at the top.
Well, then it's free.
You sure?
Yes.
Excellent. Oh, now I've got no service on the phone anyway, so if it was on 3G, I wouldn't be working anyway, would I?
Correct.
Yeah. Oh, good. Fine. Right, carry on.
Okay, well, it's not really a question. It's more of a... It says... Stuart Bailey has written, and it says...
Hi, Stu.
It's said that mad dogs and Englishmen go out in the midday sun.
Yeah.
Can we talk about it?
Well, we can. Mad dogs and Englishmen. Mad dogs don't know what's good for them, and Englishmen don't know what's good for them. And of course, we don't see much sun in this country. That's basically what I'm trying to say. And so, an Englishman sees a bit of sun, goes out in it, and gets horribly burnt. goes out in the sun, where countries that are used to that sort of weather, of course, they have a siesta and stay in when the sun is at its height. Now, dogs know about this sort of thing, and you will never find a dog lying out in the hot sun. They'll tend to go and find somewhere in the shade, unless, of course, it's a mad dog. And then a mad dog, along with an Englishman who doesn't know much about the sun, will go out in the midday sun. It's quite simple.
Well, there we go then. That's it.
Right, I'm back off to the deck chair. See everybody next week. Don't forget, if you want to hear more, go to jameswhaleradio.co.uk. And a big welcome to those new radio stations who are now putting out this programme.
I'm not going to say anything because you always say I have the last word.
You do always have the last word. Now, bugger off.
Okay.
You did it again, didn't you?
You're listening to the James Whale Radio Show. For more information, visit www.jameswhaleradio.co.uk. Why not check us out on facebook.com/James Whale Radio Show, or follow James on Twitter @the James Whale. James Whale, the voice of reason.